The crystal chandeliers of Belafonte cast golden light across pristine white tablecloths as Samantha moved with practiced grace between tables. Her experienced hands balanced 3 plates of seared scallops with the precise confidence that came from years of navigating this culinary ballet night after night. A single moment of recognition can rewrite destinies that seemed set in stone. Inside this prestigious St. Louis restaurant, fate unfolded as a waitress's knowledge of Japanese characters transformed 2 lives forever, with one unexpected observation about ink etched on skin. The evening had progressed like any other until he walked in, August Blackwood, whose name was whispered rather than spoken in St. Louis. Power radiated from him like heat from a furnace as the maitre d' escorted him to the corner table reserved permanently for his unscheduled visits. Samantha felt her heartbeat quicken as she was directed to serve his table, a responsibility that had ended careers of servers who had displeased him. She approached with professional composure, studying the sharp lines of his tailored suit rather than meeting his piercing gaze. "Your special reserve bourbon, Mr. Blackwood," she said, placing the crystal tumbler precisely 2 inches from his right hand, noticing as she did the edge of what appeared to be Japanese characters, peeking from beneath his sleeve as he reached for the glass. Without thinking, Samantha tilted her head slightly, her grandmother's lessons flooding back as she recognized the elegant strokes of kanji that had been part of her childhood. The characters were beautiful, but something wasn't right about their arrangement. August caught her studying his wrist and slowly rolled his sleeve back, revealing more of the intricate tattoo that sprawled across his forearm. "Something amusing about my ink?" he asked, his voice deceptively soft, but carrying an undercurrent that made the nearby patrons suddenly find their meals fascinating. "No, sir," Samantha replied, fighting the instinct to step back. "I just noticed the Japanese characters are unusual." The last word hung in the air between them like a suspended drop of water, ready to fall and create ripples neither could predict. His eyes narrowed dangerously as he gestured for her to continue, the entire restaurant seeming to hold its breath. "Unusual how?" he asked, the question more command than inquiry, his fingers now drumming once against the white tablecloth. "The characters," Samantha explained, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "They don't translate to eternal love, as you might have been told." She paused, weighing her next words carefully, knowing they might cost her job or worse. The restaurant's ambient noise faded away as August leaned forward slightly, his expression unreadable. "What do they say then?" he asked, the question soft, but carrying to every corner of the suddenly silent dining room. Samantha swallowed hard, fighting the urge to fabricate a more palatable translation. "Sir, the characters actually translate to boiled meat," she finally admitted, bracing herself for the explosion that would surely follow such a revelation. When August Blackwood laughed, it was perhaps the most terrifying sound Samantha had ever heard, not because it was menacing, but because it was genuine. The harsh lines of his face transformed momentarily into something almost human, something touched by actual amusement. "4 years," he said, shaking his head as the laughter subsided. "4 years I've worn my late wife's favorite dish on my arm, thinking it was our eternal bond." His eyes met Samantha's, curiosity replacing the initial flash of anger. Conversations gradually resumed around them as the immediate danger seemed to pass, but Samantha remained rooted to the spot, caught in August's evaluating gaze. "How exactly does a waitress at Belafonte recognize Japanese characters?" he asked, gesturing to the chair across from him. "My grandmother taught literature at Tokyo University for 30 years before moving here," Samantha explained, remaining standing despite his invitation to sit. "She opened the flower shop next door and taught me calligraphy every day after school when I was growing up." August's eyes flickered with something like respect, as he gestured more insistently toward the chair. "Sit," he said, his tone making it clear this was not a request any reasonable person would decline. "And tell me what these characters should have been." With the cautious movements of someone approaching an unpredictable animal, Samantha lowered herself into the chair, acutely aware that every employee in the restaurant was watching this unprecedented scenario unfold. No one simply sat with August Blackwood during business hours. "May I?" she asked, gesturing toward his arm with a hesitance that betrayed her awareness of exactly who he was. When he extended his wrist across the table, she gently turned his arm to better examine the characters, trying to ignore how the entire restaurant had gone silent again. "The artist reversed the order and misconnected several strokes," she explained, her finger hovering just above his skin without touching it. "These 2 characters, when written correctly and in proper order, would mean eternal love, but but as they are now, August studied her face with the intensity of a man accustomed to detecting lies, finding none. "Christine always ordered the same thing at our favorite restaurant in Kyoto," he said softly, a distant memory clouding his eyes. "Sukiyaki." Thinly sliced beef slowly simmered. "Boiled meat," Samantha whispered, understanding dawning on her face as pieces clicked into place. She must have written it down for the tattoo artist phonetically, but without the proper characters. A server approached their table but retreated instantly at a look from August, who seemed lost in thought for a moment, before refocusing on Samantha with unnerving intensity. "You could have lied, or said nothing at all," he observed. "Most people in this city would." "My grandmother says truth is the only luxury that matters," Samantha replied, then immediately wondered if she'd overstepped. One didn't typically offer life philosophy to men like August Blackwood, who controlled half the city through means no one discussed in polite company. The corner of August's mouth twitched upward in what might have been the beginning of a smile as he reached for his phone. "Your shift ends now," he stated rather than asked, typing something briefly before returning his attention to her stunned expression. "I'm not finished until 11, Samantha protested automatically, then regretted the words as soon as they left her mouth. Contradicting August Blackwood was rumored to be unwise at best, dangerous at worst. "You are today," he replied simply, as the restaurant manager appeared beside their table, looking simultaneously terrified and apologetic. "Paul will cover your tables and your tips will be tripled for the inconvenience." "Why?" Samantha asked, the word escaping before she could consider its wisdom, her hands gripping the edge of the table as though it might anchor her in this surreal moment. August stood, rebuttoning his suit jacket in one fluid motion that spoke of practiced elegance. "Because I want you to introduce me to your grandmother," he said, his tone making it clear this was happening regardless of her preference. The bell above the door of Hannah's Blooms chimed softly as Samantha led August Blackwood into her grandmother's shop, the sweet fragrance of lilies and roses enveloping them. The contrast between this gentle space and the man beside her couldn't have been more stark. Grandmother Hannah looked up from an arrangement of chrysanthemums, her experienced hands pausing mid-stem as her eyes assessed the visitor with a wisdom that came from decades of observing human nature. She showed no fear, only curiosity as she set down her shears. "Grandmother, this is Mr. Blackwood," Samantha began, the formal introduction feeling absurd given the circumstances. "He has some Japanese characters he'd like you to look at." "The mafia boss with the incorrect tattoo," Hannah nodded matter-of-factly, ignoring Samantha's mortified expression. "Yes, I've heard the whispers about your ink from customers who dine at Belafonte." August's eyebrows rose slightly, the only indication of surprise on his otherwise composed face. "News travels fast," he remarked, studying the elderly woman with newfound interest, as she gestured for him to take a seat on a wooden stool beside her workbench. "In my experience, Mr. Blackwood, powerful men are often surrounded by people too afraid to tell them uncomfortable truths," Hannah said, adjusting her glasses as she examined his forearm. "My granddaughter, fortunately, was not raised to prioritize comfort over honesty. A rare quality," August acknowledged, watching as the elderly woman traced the characters with a weathered finger. "One that seems to run in your family." Hannah smiled, the expression transforming her face into a map of lived experience. "Christine would have found this amusing, I think," she said softly, catching August's sharp intake of breath at his wife's name. "You knew my wife?" he asked, the carefully constructed walls around his grief momentarily visible in his widened eyes and slightly parted lips. The question hung in the flower-scented air between them, fragile as a petal. "She came here every Thursday for fresh flowers," Hannah confirmed, selecting a sprig of lavender from a nearby bucket. "Always requested arrangements that reminded her of home, but with American wildflowers mixed in. Bridging two worlds," she said. August's face remained impassive, but Samantha noticed his hands had tightened slightly against his knees. "She never mentioned this place," he said finally, his voice carrying the faintest trace of something that might have been regret. The ancient copper wind chime hanging in the corner of the shop swayed gently in the breeze from the open door, its subtle music drawing August's attention momentarily. His eyes narrowed in recognition as he studied the intricate pattern of birds in flight etched into the weathered metal. "Christine restored that," Hannah volunteered, following his gaze with a soft smile. "It came to me damaged from an estate sale, its voice silenced by a crack along the main chamber. She spent weeks researching traditional repair techniques." The revelation seemed to physically impact August, his shoulders dropping a fraction as he absorbed this unknown facet of his wife, her hands creating beauty he'd never witnessed. her time spent in quiet concentration in this place of peace, rather than in their marbled mansion, with its perfect but sterile elegance. "Some treasures we keep to ourselves, Mr. Blackwood," Hannah replied gently, her hands resuming their work on the chrysanthemum arrangement. "Even from those we love most, we sometimes carve small spaces that belong only to us." Samantha watched this exchange with growing confusion, the realization that her grandmother had a connection to August's late wife, sending ripples of unease through her. The world suddenly seemed smaller, the separation between their lives less distinct. "I would like you to teach me the correct characters," August said after a moment of contemplation, his decision apparently made, "and perhaps more about what my wife loved about this place." Hannah considered him with eyes that had witnessed 82 years of human triumphs and follies. "Language lessons require commitment, Mr. Blackwood," she warned, her tone suggesting she meant more than just the study of kanji. "I'm a patient man when something matters," August replied, his gaze shifting briefly to Samantha before returning to her grandmother. "And I find myself suddenly very interested in learning what was lost in translation." The first lesson began 3 days later in a private room at the back of Hannah's flower shop, the air fragrant with jasmine and freshly cut stems. August arrived precisely at 7, his driver waiting outside while curious neighbors peered through curtains at the unusual visitor. "Before we begin learning the correct kanji," Hannah instructed, setting down a tray of tea, "you must understand the philosophy behind each stroke." Her weathered hands demonstrated with practiced elegance, as Samantha translated certain phrases from Japanese to English. The tension in August's shoulders seemed to ease slightly as he watched the careful movements, his normally vigilant eyes focused entirely on the paper before him. For once, the constant scanning of exits and threats was temporarily suspended. "Your wife came here to reconnect with parts of herself she feared were fading," Hannah explained, showing August a pressed cherry blossom bookmark Christine had made years before. "She worried that immersion in your world was causing her to lose her identity." August's pen halted mid-stroke, the sudden rigidity in his posture revealing how deeply the casual observation had struck. "Christine never complained," he said simply, his voice carefully controlled despite the obvious emotional undercurrent. "People who truly love rarely complain about their sacrifices," Hannah replied with the wisdom of decades. "They simply make them until the cost becomes too great to bear silently." The teacup in August's hand was visibly trembling, a microscopic display of emotion that he quickly controlled by setting it down with deliberate precision. His world was built on unwavering strength. This moment of vulnerability seemed to unnerve him more than any business threat ever had. Through the shop window, Samantha could see 2 black-suited men standing beside August's car, their vigilant posture a constant reminder of the violence that shadowed his every movement. Their presence created an invisible barrier between the warmth of the flower shop and the dangerous reality waiting outside. A photograph on Hannah's shelf caught August's attention. A much younger Hannah standing beside a serious-faced Japanese man whose bearing suggested military training despite his professor's attire. "Your grandfather?" he asked, his observation skills noting the similar stance between the man in the photo and Hannah herself. Samantha watched from her position near the window, struck by the vulnerability momentarily visible in August's expression. In this softly lit room with its scents of ink and flowers, he seemed almost human, rather than the feared figure who controlled half the city. "I should return to the restaurant," Samantha said suddenly, uncomfortable with witnessing such raw emotion from a man whose reputation suggested he had none. "My shift starts in 30 minutes. "Your shift has been covered," August replied, without looking up from his practice sheet, his tone making it clear this wasn't a point of discussion. "Paul seemed quite happy with the arrangement when I spoke with him yesterday." Samantha's eyes widened in surprise, and a flicker of irritation. "You can't just rearrange my life without asking," she protested, immediately regretting her boldness when his dark gaze finally lifted to meet hers. "Yet here we are," August responded with unsettling calm, "with you teaching me Japanese rather than serving overpriced bourbon to businessmen pretending they're more important than they are." The hint of self-awareness in his observation was unexpected. "My grandmother teaches," Samantha corrected, crossing her arms defensively. "I'm just here to translate when needed." The distinction felt important, though she couldn't articulate exactly why. Outside, a black SUV pulled up behind August's car, the tinted windows revealing nothing about its occupants. Samantha noticed August's attention shift subtly toward the movement, his hand instinctively moving toward his jacket before stopping. "Your associates?" Hannah asked mildly, following his gaze while continuing to prepare fresh ink with unhurried movements. "Perhaps they would like tea while they wait." August's lips quirked in what might have been amusement. "They aren't here for tea," he replied, turning back to his practice with deliberate focus. "Just making sure no one interrupts our lesson." The casual reference to his other life, the empire of power and violence that funded his tailored suits and permanently reserved restaurant table, created an uncomfortable reminder of exactly who sat learning calligraphy in her grandmother's shop. 3 weeks of daily lessons passed, establishing a rhythm that began to feel almost normal. August would arrive precisely at 7, spend 2 hours learning from Hannah, and often linger afterward, asking questions about Christine's visits to the flower shop. The neighborhood children no longer scattered at the sight of August's car, their initial fear gradually replaced by curiosity about the important man who visited the flower shop daily. One brave little girl had even waved to him yesterday, earning a startled nod in return that had visibly confused August himself. Each evening, Samantha noticed subtle changes in his appearance. First his tie loosened, then occasionally discarded, eventually the formal suit jacket replaced by a simple button-down shirt. The armor he wore in the outside world was gradually being set aside in this space of unexpected safety. Whispers spread through St. Louis's underworld about August Blackwood's daily disappearances, his normally meticulous schedule disrupted by hours unaccounted for. Rivals began speculating about weakness, about distraction, about potential opportunities in this unexplained deviation from routine. "Why did you never mention knowing my wife?" August asked one evening, as Hannah arranged white chrysanthemums for a funeral display. The question had clearly been weighing on him, emerging now in the comfortable silence that had developed between them. "She asked me not to," Hannah replied simply, her eyes never leaving her work. "Everyone needs a sanctuary, Mr. Blackwood, a place that belongs only to them where they can be fully themselves without explanation or performance." Samantha entered with fresh tea, catching the end of their conversation, and feeling the familiar discomfort of being caught between these two strong personalities. She had begun developing her own curiosity about the man whose reputation inspired fear throughout the city. "Your tattoo is healing well," Samantha observed. Noticing the redness around the newly added characters had faded. August had commissioned a local artist to correct the original tattoo, maintaining boiled meat, but adding the proper characters for eternal love beneath it. "A reminder that mistakes can coexist with truth," August replied, absently tracing the characters with his fingertips. Christine would have appreciated the irony of carrying both meanings permanently. The bell above the shop door chimed unexpectedly, causing August to tense slightly as a man in an expensive suit entered. Samantha recognized him immediately as Dominic Ward, August's right-hand man whose calculating eyes missed nothing as they assessed the room. "We have a situation that requires your attention," Dominic stated flatly, his gaze lingering briefly on Samantha before returning to August. "The Callahan matter has escalated unexpectedly." August nodded once, the transformation immediate and striking, the student of calligraphy vanishing behind the mask of the mafia boss. "We'll continue tomorrow," he told Hannah, buttoning his jacket as he rose to his feet with fluid precision. "Be careful with my granddaughter's heart," Hannah called after him, causing both August and Samantha to freeze momentarily. "She pretends not to care, but she watches you when you aren't looking." Samantha's face burned with mortification as August turned toward her with an unreadable expression. "Grandmother," she protested weakly, wishing desperately for the floor to open and swallow her whole. "I'll return tomorrow, as usual," August said after a moment, his tone carefully neutral, though something that might have been surprise flickered across his features. With a last enigmatic look at Samantha, he followed Dominic out to the waiting cars. "Why would you say that?" Samantha demanded once they were alone, her embarrassment giving way to genuine distress. "He's a dangerous man who lives in a world completely separate from ours," Hannah continued arranging flowers with unruffled calm. "Perhaps," she acknowledged, "but I've watched him these past weeks. The man who first entered our shop would never have allowed himself to be vulnerable enough to learn from an old woman, or laugh at his own mistakes." "He's still August Blackwood," Samantha insisted, collecting the teacups with more force than necessary. "The same man who controls half the city through fear and violence. And you are still my granddaughter who sees the best in people despite their worst," Hannah replied with gentle certainty. "Perhaps that is precisely what he needs, someone who recognizes the man beneath the reputation." The next evening, August arrived at his usual time despite the previous day's abrupt departure, his demeanor betraying no sign of Hannah's embarrassing observation. A fresh bruise colored his knuckles, the only evidence of whatever situation had required his attention. "Today we will practice more conversational phrases," Hannah announced. deliberately ignoring the tension hovering between August and Samantha. Language is about connection, not just technical accuracy. Samantha avoided August's gaze as she distributed the practice materials, mortified that her grandmother had so boldly exposed feelings she herself had barely acknowledged. The irony wasn't lost on her. A woman known for her honesty, suddenly afraid of truth. "I've been meaning to ask," August said, breaking the awkward silence with unexpected directness. "Why a woman who reads Japanese and graduated top of her university class is serving bourbon to businessmen instead of pursuing her own ambitions?" Samantha considered deflecting the question as she had countless times before, but something in August's direct gaze suggested he would see through such attempts. The truth seemed less dangerous than a lie with a man rumored to sniff out deception like a bloodhound. The bourbon bottle trembled slightly in her hand, as memories of hospital corridors and mounting bills flooded back, the sterile smell of disinfectant momentarily overpowering the restaurant's rich aromas. Her dreams of academia had withered slowly, not in one dramatic moment, but through 1,000 small surrenders to necessity. Outside the restaurant windows, lightning split the St. Louis skyline, illuminating the Mississippi River in a momentary electric blue that matched the sudden flash of understanding in August's eyes. He recognized the familiar shape of sacrifice without needing her to articulate its precise dimensions. The question caught Samantha off guard, her carefully constructed walls momentarily faltering. "My father's medical bills took priority over my graduate school plans," she answered simply, seeing no point in hiding what August could easily discover through other means. "Leukemia," Hannah added quietly, the single word carrying years of struggle and loss. 3 years of treatment before we lost him last spring. The same illness that took your Christine, though Samantha's father fought considerably longer. Understanding flickered across August's face, a momentary connection through shared grief that transcended their different worlds. "I'm sorry," he said, the simple words carrying unexpected weight coming from a man rumored to be incapable of empathy. The clock on the wall ticked loudly in the silence that followed, marking the moment when something shifted between them. Not friendship exactly, but a recognition that neither was precisely who the world believed them to be. August's fingers traced the edges of his tattoo almost unconsciously. Behind them, Hannah hummed softly as she prepared fresh ink, the ancient melody a bridge between cultures and generations that seemed to calm the tension in the room. Her knowing eyes missed nothing, evaluating the tentative connection forming before her. A car backfired on the street outside, causing August to instinctively shift his position to place himself between the window and Samantha, a protective gesture so automatic he seemed unaware he'd made it. The movement revealed a thin scar along his jawline, normally invisible unless caught in the right light. "Your Japanese lessons are becoming quite advanced," Samantha observed, desperate to shift the conversation away from personal territory. "You've learned in weeks what most students take months to grasp." "I've always been a quick study," August replied, his expression softening slightly. "And perhaps I have exceptional teachers who understand that some lessons extend beyond language alone." The calligraphy brush in August's hand moved with increasing confidence across the rice paper, his natural precision lending itself well to the art form. What had begun as mechanical reproduction was evolving into something with personal character, the strokes revealing more of the man than perhaps he intended. Rain pattered against the skylight above them, creating a soothing backdrop to their lesson that seemed to wash away the tensions of the outside world. For these brief hours, August existed outside the complex web of power and obligation that defined his existence. A delivery boy arrived with books August had specially ordered from Tokyo, rare texts on regional dialects and historical calligraphy styles that revealed a depth of commitment beyond mere curiosity or obligation. He was investing in this knowledge as thoroughly as he approached his business empire. The moment of connection was shattered by the harsh ring of August's phone, his expression instantly transforming as he checked the screen. "I need to take this," he said, stepping outside with the practiced efficiency of a man accustomed to compartmentalizing his life. Through the window, Samantha could see August's face harden as he listened to the caller, his body language shifting from relaxed student to commanding boss in seconds. The transformation was both fascinating and terrifying, a stark reminder of the danger in forgetting who he truly was. "We have a problem," August announced upon returning. All warmth vanished from his voice. "The Callahan family has been watching these lessons. They believe I've developed a weakness they can exploit." "What does that mean?" Samantha asked, cold fear replacing embarrassment as she processed his words. The abstract danger of August's world suddenly felt immediate and personal in a way that made her stomach twist painfully. "It means our lessons must end," August stated flatly, his eyes meeting Hana's with silent communication. "Your safety depends on establishing distance between us immediately and convincingly. Your absence will protect them," Dominic insisted as August paced the confines of his office, the skyline of St. Louis glittering through bulletproof glass. "The Callahans have been watching the flower shop for weeks, documenting every visit." 3 days had passed since August's abrupt departure from the lessons, the longest he'd gone without seeing Samantha or Hana since their first meeting. The emptiness of those hours surprised him with its intensity, a feeling he hadn't experienced since Christine's death. "They see my interest in Japanese as weakness," August stated flatly, stopping to examine a photo Dominic had placed on his desk. A long-range shot of Samantha leaving work, clearly taken without her knowledge. "They don't understand its purpose." "With respect," Dominic replied carefully, "I've served you faithfully for 8 years, and even I don't understand why you've spent weeks learning calligraphy from an elderly woman and her granddaughter when we're on the brink of war with the Callahans." August's fingers brushed against the small wooden box on his desk, containing the calligraphy set Hana had gifted him, an heirloom that had survived 3 generations and 2 wars. The contrast between its weathered beauty and the sterile modernity of his office highlighted the dual worlds he now inhabited. On the security monitors mounted along the wall, footage played silently. 2 Callahan lieutenants photographing Samantha during her morning commute, a dark SUV following Hana to her medical appointment, patterns of surveillance that had grown increasingly bold. August had memorized every face, cataloging debts to be settled when the time came. "My father built this empire through fear," August said finally, his voice carrying an unfamiliar contemplative quality. "I've maintained it the same way, but fear is exhausting, Dominic. For those who feel it and those who inspire it, these lessons offered something different." August's gaze hardened as he turned toward his lieutenant, the temperature in the room seemingly dropping several degrees. "You forget yourself," he warned quietly, the softness of his tone more threatening than any shout could be. The silence stretched between them, until Dominic finally lowered his eyes in submission. "The Callahans have made their ultimatum clear. Either you surrender the riverfront properties, or they'll target your new friends to prove you've gone soft." Across town, Samantha arranged tulips in the shop window, her movements mechanical as her thoughts remained fixed on August's unexplained absence. The bell above the door chimed, pulling her reluctantly back to reality as a delivery man entered with a small package. "Signature required," he stated blandly, holding out an electronic pad while placing the unmarked box on the counter. Samantha signed quickly, curiosity overcoming her melancholy as she examined the package after the delivery man departed. Inside lay a single perfect origami crane, crafted from deep blue paper, its precise folds revealing a master's touch that couldn't possibly have come from August's novice hands. Beneath it rested a handwritten note in unfamiliar writing. "Cranes symbolize protection. 1,000 keep loved ones safe." "He's trying to tell us something," Hana observed, appearing silently beside her granddaughter, with the uncanny awareness that had always made Samantha wonder if her grandmother possessed some sixth sense. "This isn't a goodbye. It's a message." The following morning, another package arrived containing a book of classical Japanese poetry, a particular page marked with a pressed cherry blossom identical to the bookmark Christine had made years before. The marked poem spoke of separation as merely physical, not of the heart. By the 3rd day, Samantha began to understand the pattern, each delivery containing some element related to their lessons together, subtle communications that would appear innocent to watching eyes but carried deeper meaning for those who understood their context. The white chrysanthemums in today's arrangement weren't random, Samantha realized suddenly, examining the elaborate flower display that had been delivered to Belafonte where she had resumed her regular shifts. They represent truth in Japanese flower language. The manager approached her table with unusual deference, his normally brusque manner replaced with something resembling respect. "You've been requested to serve the private dining room," he informed her quietly, adding with significant emphasis, "The guests specifically asked for you." Instead of August, Samantha found Dominic waiting alone at the table, his cold eyes assessing her with clinical precision. "My employer wishes to extend his regrets at the abrupt termination of his lessons," he stated without preamble. "But circumstances beyond his control necessitate distance." "This isn't just about language lessons," Samantha replied, meeting Dominic's calculating gaze without flinching. "August is in danger, isn't he?" The directness of her question clearly surprised the man, whose eyebrows rose marginally before his expression returned to careful neutrality. "Mr. Blackwood's concerns are for your safety and your grandmother's," Dominic corrected, his tone suggesting he found her forward use of August's first name presumptuous. "The Callahan family has taken an unfortunate interest in his connection to you both." Samantha absorbed this information with growing alarm, suddenly understanding the cryptic messages hidden in the daily deliveries. The origami cranes, the marked poetry, the white chrysanthemums. "He's been warning us while appearing to maintain distance." A waiter passed their table, depositing fresh water with practiced efficiency, his sleeve riding up just enough to reveal the edge of a tattoo that matched one Samantha had glimpsed on several of August's men. The realization that they'd been surrounded by his people all along without her noticing sent a chill down her spine. Through the restaurant's windows, Samantha could see the distinctive silhouette of St. Louis's Gateway Arch, its sweeping curve connecting east and west, a bridge between worlds not unlike the one she'd unwittingly crossed when she first commented on August's tattoo that fateful evening. On the table between them lay Dominic's phone, its screen displaying a text message consisting only of numbers. A countdown, Samantha realized with sudden clarity. Whatever was happening tonight had been precisely choreographed, her role scripted without her knowledge or consent. "I neither confirm nor deny Mr. Blackwood's involvement in any deliveries you may have received," Dominic responded automatically, though the slight narrowing of his eyes suggested Samantha's deduction had hit its mark. "I'm simply here to ensure you understand the situation's gravity." The conversation was interrupted by commotion near the restaurant's entrance, raised voices followed by the distinctive sound of breaking glass. Dominic was on his feet instantly, hand reaching inside his jacket with practiced efficiency. "Stay here," he commanded, his entire demeanor transforming from businessman to soldier in the space of a heartbeat. The door had barely closed behind him when Samantha's phone vibrated with an incoming text from an unknown number. "Back exit, now." Without hesitation, Samantha slipped through the kitchen, ignoring the startled looks from the staff as she pushed through the rear delivery door into the alley behind Belafonte. A nondescript sedan idled there, the driver's window lowering to reveal Hannah's serene face. "Grandmother?" Samantha gasped in disbelief. "You don't even drive." She hurried to the passenger door, as sounds of altercation from within the restaurant grew louder, suggesting whatever distraction had been created wouldn't last long. "There are many things about me you don't know," Hannah replied calmly, accelerating with unexpected skill as soon as Samantha's door closed. "Including that before I was a professor or a florist, I was married to a man not unlike your August." The revelation struck Samantha speechless as her grandmother navigated the city streets with the confidence of someone intimately familiar with evasive driving techniques. "Your grandfather wasn't a literature professor?" she finally managed, trying to reconcile this new information with the stories she'd grown up hearing. "Akio taught literature, yes," Hannah confirmed, checking the rearview mirror with practiced vigilance. "But before that, he was Kyodai in the Sumiyoshi Kai, what you would call a captain in one of Japan's most powerful Yakuza families." The pieces suddenly aligned in Samantha's mind. Her grandmother's calm in August's presence, her understanding of his world, the way she'd recognized the subtle power dynamics at play from their first meeting. "You knew exactly who August was from the beginning." "I recognized a man divided between worlds," Hannah corrected, turning down an unmarked service road that led away from the city. "Just as I once watched Akio struggle to leave behind a life of power for one of peace." The sedan came to a stop before a modest cabin nestled among trees, its exterior unremarkable save for the advanced security cameras subtly positioned around the property. "August has been preparing this safe house for weeks," Hannah explained as she cut the engine. August himself emerged from the cabin, his usual immaculate appearance replaced by casual clothing and several days' stubble that somehow made him more approachable rather than less. His eyes betrayed momentary relief at seeing them before hardening with determination. "The Callahans made their move earlier than anticipated," he explained without preamble, ushering them quickly inside where Samantha was surprised to discover a fully stocked living space. "This location should remain secure while I resolve the situation permanently." "You can't just lock us away while you fight a war," Samantha protested, pacing the cabin's main room while August checked security monitors displaying various angles of the surrounding forest. "We're not possessions to be protected. We're people with choices." August turned to face her, surprise evident in his expression, as if the concept of her having input on the situation had never occurred to him. The Callahans threatened you specifically to get to me, he explained with strained patience. Your safety isn't negotiable. Neither is my freedom, Samantha countered, crossing her arms defiantly as Hana watched their exchange with knowing eyes. If I'm a target because of my connection to you, then I deserve to have a say in how that's handled. The impasse stretched between them until Hana broke the silence with a gentle cough. Perhaps there is a third option beyond hiding or fighting, she suggested, her weathered hands folding calmly in her lap, as both younger people turned toward her expectantly. When Akio wished to leave his Yakuza family, he didn't fight his way out or flee in secret, Hana explained, her voice carrying the weight of lived experience. He negotiated a formal separation through channels of respect that preserved honor for all parties. August's expression shifted from dismissal to consideration as he processed her words. The Callahans aren't bound by the same codes of honor as traditional Yakuza, he noted, though his tone suggested he was genuinely contemplating her suggestion. All men of power understand respect, Hana replied with quiet certainty, even those who appear to have none. The question is whether you're prepared to offer something valuable enough to make your request worth honoring. Understanding dawned on August's face as he sat heavily in the chair opposite Hana. The riverfront properties, he stated, the words coming reluctantly. They've wanted them for years. Access would double their distribution capabilities overnight. Sometimes the path forward requires letting go of what we thought we needed to hold, Hana observed, her gaze shifting meaningfully between August and her granddaughter. Akio surrendered territories and businesses worth millions to secure our peaceful future together. The revelation that Hana had experienced a similar situation decades earlier seemed to impact August deeply, his typical mask of control slipping to reveal genuine contemplation. I built my empire on never showing weakness, he said finally, the admission clearly difficult. There's difference between weakness and wisdom, Samantha interjected softly, moving to stand beside his chair. Recognizing when the cost of fighting exceeds the value of what you're fighting for isn't surrender, it's strategy. 3 days later, under the neutral ground of St. Louis Cathedral, August and Patrick Callahan signed documents transferring ownership of the contested riverfront properties in exchange for formal recognition of August's personal relationships as protected and inviolable. My father would call this foolishness, Patrick commented, as attorneys witnessed their signatures, his aging face impassive despite the significant victory he had just secured, surrendering prime territory for a woman and an old lady. August's expression remained carefully neutral as he closed the leather portfolio containing the transfer documents. Your father understood only domination, he replied evenly, which is why he died surrounded by guards instead of people who cared for him. The significance of the moment wasn't lost on Samantha, who watched from the cathedral steps as August emerged into the sunlight, the weight of conflict visibly lifted from his shoulders for the first time since she'd known him. Something fundamental had shifted in him. Priorities realigned. 1 month later, August stood in the center of Belafonte restaurant, now under his official ownership rather than merely his patronage, surrounded by contractors discussing renovation plans. The exclusive establishment would soon incorporate a traditional Japanese tea room overseen by Hana herself. Are you certain about this? Samantha asked, examining blueprints that showed the restaurant transformed into a unique fusion of American luxury and Japanese aesthetic. Changing your flagship territory into something so different from what built your reputation? August's hand found hers, the simple gesture still new enough to send warmth spreading through her chest. I'm not erasing what was, he explained, fingers tracing the dual-meaning tattoo on his forearm, just creating space for what can be alongside what has been. Thank you all for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed it, please write in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video, as your support is what keeps these stories coming. What would you sacrifice for someone who saw the real you beneath your reputation?